Hi, I'm Bill Patton with Infinite Vision Tennis, and I'm here with SpecTennis founder Nate Gross, and we're going to talk a little bit about SpecTennis and how did it get started, and why is it a valuable thing and a great alternative to pickleball, especially. So, all right. So, Nate, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background as a player, and what are you currently doing, and how did you come into the starting of SpecTennis?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So I grew up in Northern California, played junior tennis, played a little bit of college tennis as well. And then after college, I started teaching tennis at a club just north of San Francisco. One day I was like driving by some pickleball courts, and this was before pickleball was really well known. Driving by some courts with my dad, and we stopped to take a look at them. And I was intrigued by the size of the court. I didn't really know anything about pickleball, but I remembered back to my experience as a kid going down to Venice Beach a couple times and playing what they have as paddle tennis. And so we wondered if I could go out there and play paddle tennis on those pickleball courts. And so I went out there with my dad and tried it out, and it was okay. It wasn't quite perfect, but being a tennis teaching pro, I know that there's a lot of different tools out there, different balls, different types of rackets. And so then I wondered, like, well, I have, the platform tennis paddle that I used when I taught a little bit in Connecticut. I was exposed to platform tennis. And so then I wondered, if I modified the equipment and the ball, could I make this an enjoyable experience? And so after a few tries, I settled on the orange dot ball, and I settled on starting the sport with a platform tennis paddle. And then I got to thinking, like, well, this is really fun for my dad and I, like, maybe it's fun for other people as well. And that's kind of how the idea was born. Like, maybe we could actually start a new sport on a pickleball court that people would enjoy.
Okay, so when was the first SpecTennis match played?
It was in the summer of 2016. So
okay.
I had this idea, tried it out in this early summer of 2016. Then by the end of 2016, I actually had a tournament where I had 7 or 8 tennis players, local tennis players, got them to play in the tournament without ever having have played spec tennis before. So it was kind of a leap of faith. Like, they signed up for this 2-day long tournament, singles one day, doubles the other day. And by the end of it, everybody was having a blast. They all played a ton of matches. I played myself. And it was just then I realized, like, from that day forward, like, that this could really be something.
Yeah, in fact, I think I got an invitation to play in that, and I was like, what the heck is this? And, at that point, I was like a broken down mess, so I didn't want to embarrass myself at that point. But nowadays, I'm feeling a lot better, and I can't wait to start playing. Anyway, how can SpecTennis be a bridge into tennis?
So I've really seen it the past year. I've actually been incorporating it into my tennis lessons and offering SpecTennis classes and lessons as well. But one thing that I've found is that players can pick up the skill quicker with the SpecTennis paddle and the soft tennis ball faster than they can with a full-size tennis racket on a full-size court with a yellow ball. And so what this helps with is it helps really build confidence and gives players a good feeling every time they're on the tennis court, having that success, and then they're more motivated to want to keep playing, to want to keep improving, to want to go out and practice on their own. So I go through a lot of progressions on the court, even with adults as well, not just for kids, where, for example, if I'm going to teach somebody a topspin forehand, let me grab a paddle real quick so the viewers can kind of see what the heck I'm talking about with this paddle business. So if I'm teaching like a topspin forehand, right, if I teach it with this paddle first, the sweet spot's a lot closer to the hand than a 27-inch tennis racket. And so that makes it so they can really find the sweet spot of the paddle. They can get the feel for how to spin the ball or how to work on that specific skill that we're doing. The ball's not bouncing over their head like it often is with the yellow tennis ball. And so it really gives them an environment where they can progress really fast. So even within the same tennis lesson, I'll have them grab their paddle, then grab their tennis racket, then grab their paddle, then grab their tennis racket. So we're going back and forth through all these different progressions based on the skills that they're doing. And then also practicing. I find that that's one of the biggest issues that I have with tennis coaching is I feel, I give a good lesson and then the players do really well in the lesson, but then they don't practice what we worked on in the lesson outside. And I think one of the reasons for that is because it can be difficult to practice with somebody of your same level and have good control of the ball and have fun doing it. Whereas where if you or I go out with a player, we can put the ball pretty much where we want the ball to go so that they can set them up for success. And so I actually have my players now, I give them a SpecTennis paddle and have them practice SpecTennis on their own, and not worry as much about practicing tennis, because they're going to have more success and they're more likely to actually practice before next week's lesson.
Awesome. And I've been using it more and more with my brand new kids to tennis, especially the wild ones, because sometimes you get these kids and they just seem to be wired like with fast twitch muscles. And so every shot is like checkered flag or crash, right? And so
checkered flag,
especially 9-year-old boys, because they're a little crazy, they're a little nuts. And so I can think of a couple of kids that I'm coaching right now who just absolutely love the spec paddles. And we do something called mini match, which they love, and it kind of bridges the ability to have them actually playing something that resembles points, because that's more interesting to them than just getting, instruction in technique for a solid hour. All right, next question. Have you found that it will improve your tennis game, and what way?
Yes, I kind of already touched on that as well, with like going through the progressions. But the one thing that I like that you just said about getting them feeling like they're playing real points or playing a real match, they enjoy that more than just instructional technique oriented play. I think that's one of the other things I've found as well, is in order for people to have fun in tennis, like the most of the time they enjoy playing games more so than they do like drilling out of a basket. And I think SpecTennis, you can get them to a stage where they're able to play those games quicker than you might be able to with tennis. And so that's another thing that really keeps the focus up, keeps them engaged, keeps them having fun. They get to really see what the whole sport is like. Similar to other sports, like you're gonna practice soccer during the week and then you're gonna play in a soccer game on the weekend. But unfortunately, tennis doesn't have that model, because you need to get to a rallying level before you can actually play those games and stuff. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that as well.
And one of my criticisms of the whole red, orange, green thing is the inconsistency of the equipment. So one brand's green ball does this, another brand's green ball does something a little different. The orange balls, I have bought orange balls that just didn't bounce right.
I experienced a lot of that myself,
one brand, the red balls bounce way too high, one they don't bounce enough. And the other thing is, some of these little mini rackets, I get a kid and he's got a little 23-inch racket, but every shot he hit, it's just like boing, and then I'm like, hey, give me that racket. And it's strung at like 25 pounds. So so they've got little slingshots in their hands, and it's hard for them to control. But that's a great thing about SpecTennis, is that the paddles are extremely uniform. So everybody's going to get the same response with the racket. And provided you're using the same brand of orange ball, then, it brings a lot more uniformity to it. All right, next question. How can coaches and clubs utilize SpecTennis as a way to increase revenue potential?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that there's really a big opportunity for clubs to incorporate this, and coaches as well, because it really just fuels your tennis program. So imagine that you have a tennis program with 50 players in it. And if you add SpecTennis, you might be able to get 100 players in your tennis program, because there's a lower barrier to entry. Kids see their friends having more success and having fun and being able to rally, and parents are walking by the courts and their kids are performing better than they are in a typical tennis class. And so it's easier to attract new kids, because they see it happening and they think, well, I could probably do that. Like I don't need to take 5 years of lessons before I can play like that kid is playing right there. And then also it retains them better too, because they're having more fun. Like you're able to play more of those games that you're talking about, where they're competing against each other or playing cooperatively with each other, but it's not so coach on one side, kids on the other side, feeding the ball out of the basket, like we have seen a lot traditionally in tennis coaching. So I think that it can really fuel the program. You can fit 4 times as many kids on a tennis court if you're doing SpecTennis than if you're just doing tennis, as the viewers may know, the SpecTennis court is the same size as the pickleball court, and 4 of those will fit within the constraints of the tennis court. And then I've also found that I can run really large clinics with SpecTennis, and as long as the age is pretty organized and well thought out, like say for example age 9 to 12, I've had 14 kids on a court with myself only. And the tennis pros are going to say, oh, that's crazy, you can't have more than 6 kids per pro. But a lot of what I'm doing is kind of self-guided learning, where I'll give the kids a skill that they have to perform with a partner, and each player has a specific role. This player is doing X, this player is doing Y, and they're performing that role, and I'm roaming around helping them with that role. But it's not me standing there feeding balls to a line out of a basket. And so I'm able to manage a large group and still provide a very good product, in my opinion. I don't see parents coming on the court complaining, oh, why are there 14 kids on a court and just you out there? I feel like I've actually delivered a really good product that's well worth their money. And so think about the revenue potential with that. If you can up the number of kids that you can get from 6 to 14, I think that's a really big opportunity. And then the other thing is the final component of that is lessons. I mean, I think from what I've seen so far, I know there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. A lot of people, they'll take a pickleball lesson, maybe a couple of them, and then they'll move on to social play because they've learned some basic strategies and some basic shots. And so they're ready to go out and play in their groups. And so if you're a club or you're a pro and you lose that player, you don't retain them. Now you have to find another player to take the lesson. Whereas if you start somebody off with SpecTennis lessons or tennis lessons, they typically stay with you for a long time if you're doing a good job. And so SpecTennis just leads right into tennis. So you start somebody off, you offer tennis lessons and you say, this is how we start off our tennis players, because XYZ are going to get a lot of success. You're going to have more fun. You're going to be able to rally with your parents, with your friends. And so, it's just kind of pushing them up the ladder of tennis. And so by offering SpecTennis to fuel your program, I really think the lesson revenue is a lot higher. Whereas something like pickleball, you get a lot of revenue from maybe running leagues, running tournaments and that sort of thing, maybe charging a court fee. But I don't think, in my opinion, that the same revenue potential is there as with tennis or SpecTennis.
All right. And so compared to pickleball especially, why is SpecTennis a better alternative when it comes to growing tennis?
Because I really teach it exactly the same way I teach tennis. And I recommend that players, when they play it, they hit the strokes the same way as they would hit in tennis. There's no different rules, really. So, for example, if you're familiar with pickleball, there's a no volley zone. We don't have that in SpecTennis. And so you practice stepping in close to the net to close out a volley from an athletic position. And so it's really, for example, if I was teaching a player to volley, they're going to overcome their fear of getting hit by the ball a lot sooner in SpecTennis than they will in full-size tennis with somebody blasting a yellow ball at them. So they become really comfortable with volleying, and then they just translate that exact same skill to using a bigger tool and a bigger size court. So I think that's really, like I mentioned before, like you can attract more players to the game when they see like it's more doable. Like, for example, if you have a basketball hoop in a park, all you need is a basketball, you go out and you shoot hoops. It's very low barrier to entry. And I think that's what SpecTennis can really do for tennis as well. Because like I've seen you do before, you actually play in your driveway and it's very easy. You don't even need a net. You can just have fun with somebody, hit the ball back and forth. I was playing in the house a little bit during the quarantine. I set up a ball machine in the house and was playing. So it's just it's a very safe, low barrier to entry option to get people into a sport that is the most similar to tennis, in my opinion.
Well, and our friend Sterling has set up a permanent SpecTennis court in his driveway, which is pretty amazing. I saw that in your promotional video, and I just had a little twinge of jealousy at that moment. So I'm going to try to up my game so that I can make the SpecTennis promotional video in the future. But now let's break down other alternative paddle sports, racket sports, and what are the advantages over SpecTennis over the other ones like padel or platform tennis, or what's another one to compare to?
Pop tennis, touch tennis, any of those ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're all great, and I think that this Right now, I think there's definitely showing a demand for other alternatives to tennis. I mean, with the growth of pickleball and seeing people go out for all these different sports, I think it's getting a lot of people on the courts that might not otherwise be playing tennis. And so I think they're all great. I'd say one advantage that I think SpecTennis has is the court size. So utilizing the pickleball court, they're popping up everywhere every day. A lot of people, they'll see a tennis court get converted to a pickleball court. They'll be frustrated about that. I can see why people are frustrated about that, but I see that as an opportunity. So, okay, they put that pickleball court in there. Great, we can play SpecTennis there now. But the ability to just fit 4 of those on a tennis court, I think, is so big. Whereas with platform tennis, for example, you got to build a deck. You have to build a structure that's going to cost, I don't want to give you a wrong estimate, but let's say $20,000 to build a platform tennis court. You got to put lights in. You got to do all this. Same thing with padel. You got to put in glass walls. You got to put in an AstroTurf surface. So I think that while they're very fun sports, I guess the club has to ask, like, is this practical for us to put in to invest this kind of money to try out this sport? Whereas if you want to try out SpecTennis, it's like, just do it on your tennis court first. If you don't have a pickleball court, very easy to set up without marking lines, or if you want to make it more formal, mark some lines temporarily or permanently. So I think just the fact that it's positioned on the pickleball court and you can just go back and forth between a tennis class. Like, for example, if you were using padel to train tennis, you're not going to walk to the padel court and then walk back to the tennis court and then walk to padel court within the same class. It's going to be, all right, we're doing padel today. But here with SpecTennis, you just have the ability to just incorporate it at any moment. I mean, I always have the paddles in my teaching basket, and oftentimes I'll pick them up and the kids will start getting excited. They like playing it a lot.
Awesome. And now, so what have you not discussed already about getting started playing SpecTennis?
Great. Yeah. So if you would like to get started playing SpecTennis, if you have questions about the sport or anything like that, you can shoot me an email, spectennis@yahoo.com. That's SPEC tennis@yahoo.com. Also, spectennis.com has a lot of resources on there. That site's being relaunched pretty soon. So hopefully I have the new site up and running with a lot of better resources on there. And then from spectennis.com, there's a link to be able to shop for paddles, which is the brand is spadesports.com, like the playing card, SPADE sports.com. So that's where people can get set up to get started, but definitely feel free to send me an email if you have questions or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a good chance that some people in this audience are going to be interested in becoming ambassadors. So how do you apply for ambassadorship?
Yeah, so we have an ambassador program that's basically means you're passionate about SpecTennis. You don't have to be an elite level player to apply to be an ambassador. It just means that you're passionate and you want to grow the game within your community. And so there's the ability to earn commissions on paddle sales and things like that if you're interested in that. But also just I provide you with a lot of resources to help you grow the game and within your community. So if you'd like to apply to be an ambassador for SpecTennis, I'd love to hear from you. And that is done at USSPTA.com, which is the United States SpecTennis Association. You can also access that through SpecTennis.com.
Okay, terrific. And there are some things about, other sports the other racket sports that are a little problematic for me. So you don't have to endorse what I'm saying, but you may want to comment after. I mean, for me, one of the main benefits of SpecTennis is it doesn't have that, really loud pock noise, that comes with pickleball. Another one is the name, right? SpecTennis sounds cool. Pickleball does not. There are a lot of people who actually just, I don't know, they don't like the sound of the other name. And, and then finally, I mean, I think the thing that's most disconcerting to me about pickleball is the kitchen, because as someone who really loves to play the net and to volley, to have this feeling that I have to be restrained behind this and that I also have to stoop in a funny way to go down to get the ball. That for me is difficult physically. And I would like to know what the what the injury rate is in these different sports. But you know, in my uninformed opinion is that spec tennis will be easier on people's body because they won't have to like all of a sudden come to a grinding halt behind a line, you know,
Yeah, I
and
agree with
stuff
that
like
for sure.
that. So, and then
I
also
think,
the final word, sorry, the strange scoring makes it a very difficult transition to and from tennis. I know people who've become pickleball players and they said that they were getting dinged quite often for calling the score wrong. You get in trouble in pickleball if you call it wrong. So but so transitioning back and forth and the mental game of those two things is a very difficult transition in my opinion. So
yeah, they
what do you
said there's
think?
definitely a learning curve there with the scoring system. And I also say, you know, like tennis and spec tennis, like it allows you to always be in an athletic position if you want to be. I think the kitchen, I think when played properly, like if you're playing pickleball at a high level, you will try to get into an athletic position to dink the ball. And oftentimes you'll see like the better players, the ball will bounce and then they'll step into the kitchen, into an athletic position. But I see for a lot of players and they're just bending over. They're not bending the knees or bending at the waist, leaning into the kitchen to play the ball. And I can't see that being, you know, the healthiest way versus doing what the body wants to do, which is stepping into that shot. So I do see, you know, your point about all that. And I've definitely heard a lot of issues with complaints about noise. And I think that's one thing. Spec tennis just sounds like you're playing tennis. So if you're playing spec tennis next to a group of tennis players, there's never going to be a complaint from either group about the sound coming from the court.
Yeah, that's really important to me. And then not only that, but I've recently been hearing some murmurings about the behavior of pickleball groups of people and how they tend to have this sort of takeover mentality. So it's like anybody who doesn't play pickleball is not a viable citizen with a voice. You know, they are tending to want to sort of bully, for lack of a better word, those around them.
Yeah, I've heard of some of that too. And I think, you know, one of the things I'm trying to really make spec tennis into is kind of this a really special community where it's kind of like a pay it forward principle that I think has been lacking from tennis that might have used to be in tennis. And I also saw that a little bit in pickleball, but now I think as people get to higher levels and get more competitive, they start losing that a lot, which I think was one of the best things about it. Like you could go to a court and somebody would invite you out to the court to you know, come try it out no matter what level you are. And so I'm really trying to push that in spec tennis. It's like, hey, well, you got to a good level because somebody better than you probably took you on the court and played with you. And so I've run some leagues where one of the divisions was pickleball, one was spec tennis, one was tennis. And like I hear some chatter from some of the pickleball players like saying how they are not invited to this group anymore because they're not at, you know, X level. And so I think that, I mean, it really boils down to like, why do we play sports in the first place? I mean, I'm not going to become a Wimbledon champion. I'm playing sports because I really, really enjoy playing them, and it's social and it's a fun experience to get exercise on the court. That's kind of one of the, I was talking to somebody the other day. That's one of the things that I thought was the best thing about the COVID shutting down like the USTA leagues and stuff was that people, you see them out at the club and they're playing tennis for fun and they're playing against people that they didn't normally play against because they're not worried about their rating and they're not worried about losing to so-and-so. And I just really felt like people were kind of going back to the original reason why they started playing tennis in the first place.
Yeah, and for me at my club, I mean, we're very much a community-based club, and we want social play. I have no ambition of hosting lots of USTA league teams at my club, nor do my people really want that. And I love it. And so we're going to do lots of drop-in stuff, and I'm going to start doing a free spec tennis class because I want to get ahead of pickleball since we're building 4 pickleball courts on top of tennis courts coming up soon. So I want to get my people playing SpecTennis before they even know what pickleball is. And then if they really demand me to teach pickleball, then that's what I'm going to do, because, that's how you serve your people, but
Oh yeah, I think that
they're
definitely
going to
a
have to
place for sure.
coerce me. So anyway, all right. Any last words as we wrap this up and turn it around and do the SpecTennis podcast? Any final things that you want to leave with us?
Yeah, just love to get on the court with you soon on the SpecTennis court, whether it's in your driveway or at your club. I'll have to come out your way to Oakland at some point.
All right, yeah, it's gonna happen, and maybe we'll set something up here within a couple of months to get you to do like a demo again with our members, so that everybody can see what's going on and see why it's going to be so much better. All right. So thank you, Nate Gross of SpecTennis.com, for coming on the show. And now we're going to turn it around like right on a dime, and it's going to become the SpecTennis podcast.